Good evening, members of the Academy. I am pleased to be here to speak with you about my personal reports regarding my imprisonment in the development of special talents. I have been labeled a performer, or more specifically, a dancer. Before I was taken into custody by foreign specialists, I had no intention or mere thought of competing and performing a series of some kind of ritualistic movements meshed together to create a logical dance. I was clueless at first and overwhelmed with an entirely new language I had never heard before, let alone learned to speak. Little to my knowing at the time, I would one day completely be transformed into one of the trade's best. I remember 12 years ago when it began, as if it were just a week ago. I was attending some kind of human gathering specified for an annual holiday when out of nowhere, these flying and skipping creatures invaded my personal area and flooded me with information and pressure to become one of them and join their cult-like group. I could not lie and say I wasn't intrigued, but at the same time I was hesitant to comply with these loud and abrasive specimens. Out of sheer youthful curiosity, I had made the decision to leave what I know behind and take a step into this intimidating world that would eventually one day lead me to both tears of joy as well as sorrow, numerous times over. From day one, I felt I could never leave. I knew I would be changed from that point on and never be allowed to perceive the world in the same manner as I previously did, to fit in and conform to this new crowd. I was first ordered to learn and begin speaking a specialized dialect. From then on, the speech as well as personal conduct would forever rule my life, but I couldn't tear myself away. I was taken to buildings that consisted of one large room and specific types of flooring which I soon learned to be called studios. I was forced to spend hours upon hours, day in and day out, in these square cells, learning to leap and jump and potentially fly with grace and style. I started to adapt quickly and found myself speaking their language, not even realizing I understood what each word meant. I found myself acting like these clones I'd lived with. We dressed the same way, spoke about the same things, ate the same foods, and called each other family, even though I knew secretly no one truly felt this way. We only saw each other as competition, always fooling ourselves with our love talk. As I began to master this craft, I soon learned I would have to move beyond the studio prison and venture onto gatherings in which I would compete and strive to be better than all the other dancers there. After my first competition, my life as a dancer propelled into high speed, and it was all I knew. I had forgotten my life before that and knew I could never go back, not even if I wanted to. I began improving my technique tremendously each and every day, always keeping in mind reaching the top. Soon a group of 8 of us started to merge together, and our leader noticed this happening. Before we knew it, she had strung us together and we would be a team for years to come. We competed more and more, traveling further and further to dominate and obliterate the competition. A couple years later, we found ourselves ready to jump borders and move on to crushing the foreign opponents. After our first team trip across the Atlantic Ocean, we soon found out we had gotten wrapped up in our heads and that we were in fact not the prodigies we once believed ourselves to be. Upset with this notion, we forced ourselves to push our bodies as far as we could in order to get ahead of the world. We trained and trained, swearing to ourselves that next year we would be at the top. Months later, after vigorous preparation and almost self-mutilation in a way, we found ourselves back with the overseas competition and this time came out on top. We had conquered the craft and all that was left was to stay on top. We had been together now for years and were comfortable with one another in our spots on the team. No one could take it from us. All this came crashing down one day at a routine competition. As I was at the height of my dance, something terrible happened. I landed incorrectly out of one of my leaps and completely demolished my knee, a major part of my dance. I had had injuries in the past that I sprang back from, but nothing to this extent. My team was in shock and we all knew the truth, but no one dared mention it to my face. I myself didn't even want to face it, but I knew it would never be the same again. I would have to leave the team. I had always thought my dancing would never end, but reality came back to haunt me after confining myself to a square studio year after year and shielding myself from the outside world I once knew and loved. I would have to somehow adapt back into this foreign land and pick up from where I left off if I had any hope of staying mentally sane. It took hard work and dedication to migrate back to the place I swore I would never return to, but I fought every day and have now found myself here, speaking with you fine people about the life I once lived. I cannot tell you the outcome of this decision and where it will lead me, but I can report that I have moved on despite being told and led to believe it could never happen. I am proud to be standing here today, free once again as I faintly remember so many years ago.